boys and girls. Happy Thursday. It is officially your last day of second grade, your last day of e-learning. Yay! Um, like I said yesterday, I'm really hoping to get through the rest of the story, but if I don't, I will post a video on Friday so that we can finish up the book on Friday. I know for sure we'll be able to finish it by the end of this week. So hopefully we can get that done. A couple things. Happy summer birthday to Arizona. Arizona's celebrating a birthday early. She has a birthday this summer. And tonight is our final Zoom. So if you could be on Zoom tonight, that would be fantastic. It is our final one. It'll be kind of like the last time to see everyone until we go back to school in the fall. So let's go ahead and get started with our story. We stopped with the pilot stopped and he said, "The giant has just stopped. He's waving us down." The pilots throttled back the engines and all 9 helicopters landed safely on the great yellow wasteland. Then each of them lowered a ramp from its belly. 9 jeeps, one from each helicopter, were driven down the ramps. Each jeep contained 6 soldiers and a vast quantity of thick rope and heavy chains. "I don't see any giants," the head of the army said. "The giants is all just out of sight over there," the BFG told him. "But if you was taking these swashbuckling, noisy belly poppers any closer, all the giants is waking up at once, and then pop goes the weasel." "So you want us to proceed by jeep?" the head of the army asked. "Yes," the BFG said, "but you must all be very, very hushy quiet. No roaring of motors, no shouting, no mucking about, no piggery-joggery." The BFG, with Sophie still in his ear, trotted forward as the jeeps followed close behind. Suddenly, the most dreadful rumbling noise was heard by everyone. The head of the army went pea-green in the face. "Those are guns," he cried. "There's a battle raging somewhere up ahead of us. Turn back, the lot of you. Let's get out of here." "Pig spiffle," the BFG said. "Those noises is not guns." All right, so the head of the army just heard guns. He thought he heard guns. And the BFG said, No, those aren't guns. Think to yourself, what do you think that noise is? Any predictions? "Of course they're guns," shouted the head of the army. "I'm a military man, and I know a gun when I hear one. Turn back now." "Those is the giants snortling in their sleep," the BFG said. "I is a giant myself, and I know a giant snortle when I is hearing one." So were you predicting you think it's a snore, a giant snore? If you were correct. "Are you quite sure?" the army man said anxiously. "Positive," the BFG said. "Proceed cautiously," the army man ordered. They all moved on. Then they saw them. Even at a distance, they were enough to scare the daylight out of the soldiers. But when they got close and saw what the giants really looked like, they began to sweat with fear. 9 fearsome, ugly, half-naked, 50 feet long brutes lay sprawled over the ground in various attitudes of sleep, and the sound of their snoring was indeed like gunfire in a battle. The BFG raised his hand. The jeeps all stopped. The soldiers got out. "What happens if one of them wakes up?" whispered the head of the army, his knees knocking together from fear. "If any one of them is waking up, he will gobble you down before you can say, 'Knack knife,'" the BFG answered, grinning hugely. Me is the only one what won't be gobbled up, because giants is never eating other giants. Me and Sophie is the only one safe, because I is hiding her if that happens." The head of the army took several paces to the back. So did the head of the Air Force. They climbed rather quickly back into their jeep, ready to make the fast getaway if necessary. "Go forward, men," the head of the army said. "Go forward and do your duty bravely." The soldiers crept forward with their ropes and chains. All of them were trembling mightily. None dared speak a word. Okay, so here is a picture. It's on 2 pages, so I'm going to try and put it on here. Of the men in the jeeps, and then the BFG, and then here's all the other giants sleeping. The BFG, with Sophie now sitting on the palm of his hand, stood nearby watching the operation. To give the soldiers their due, they were extremely courageous. There were 6 well-trained, efficient men working on each giant, and within 10 minutes, 8 out of the 9 giants had been trussed up like chickens and were still snoring contently. The 9th, who happened to be the flesh lump eater, was causing trouble for the soldiers because he was lying on it with his right arm tucked underneath his enormous body. It was impossible to tie his wrists and arms together without first getting that arm out from underneath him. Very, very cautiously, the 6 soldiers who were working on the flesh lump eater began to pull at the huge arm, trying to release it. The flesh lump eater opened his tiny, piggy black eyes. "Which of you foul pesters is wiggling my arm?" he bellowed. "Is that you, you rotsome man-hugger?" Suddenly, he saw the soldiers. In a flash, he was sitting up, and he looked around him. He saw more soldiers. With a roar, he leaped up to his feet. The soldiers, petrified with fear, froze where they were. They had no weapons with them. The head of the army put his jeep in reverse. "Human beings!" the flesh lump eater yelled. "What is all of you flesh-bunkling, rotsome, half-baked beans doing in our country?" He made a grab at a soldier and swept him up in his hand. "I is having early suppers today," he shouted, holding the poor, squirming soldier at arm's length and roaring with laughter. Sophie, standing on the palm of the BFG's hand, was watching, horror-struck. "Do something!" she cried to the BFG. So there's the illustration there. BFG and, over there, Sophie, and then there's the flesh lump eater. "Quick, before he eats him!" Sophie cried again. "Put that human being down!" the BFG shouted. The flesh lump eater turned and stared at the BFG. "What is you doing here with all these grotly twiglets?" he bellowed. "You is making me very suspicious." The BFG made a rush at the flesh lump eater, but the colossal 50-foot-high giant simply knocked him over with a flick of his free arm. At the same time, Sophie fell off the BFG's palm and onto the ground. Her mind was racing. She must do something. She must. She remembered the sapphire brooch the queen had pinned onto her chest. Quickly, she undid it. "I is guzzling you nice and slow," the flesh lump eater was saying to the soldier in his hand. "Then I is guzzling 10 or 20 more of you midgy little maggots down there. You is not getting away from me because I is galloping 50 times faster than you." Sophie ran up behind the flesh lump eater. She was holding the brooch between her fingers. When she was right up close to the great, naked, hairy legs, she rammed the 3-inch-long pin of the brooch as hard as she could into the flesh lump eater's right ankle. It went deep into the flesh and stayed there. The giant gave a roar of pain and jumped high in the air. He dropped the soldier and he made a grab for his ankle. The BFG, knowing what a coward the flesh lump eater was, saw his chance. "Oh, you is bitten by a snake," he shouted. "I seed it biting you. It was a frightsome, poisonous viper. It was a dreadly, dangerous, vinscreen viper." "Save our souls!" bellowed the flesh lump eater. "Sound the crumpets! I is bitten by a septious, winsome, vinscreen viper." He flopped to the ground and he sat there, howling his head off and clutching his ankle with both hands. His fingers felt the brooch. The teeth of the deadly viper is still sticking into me, he yelled. I is feeling the teeth sticking into my anklet. The BFG saw his second chance. We must be getting those viper's teeth out at once, he cried. Otherwise, you is deader than duck soup. I is helping you. The BFG knelt down beside the flesh lump eater. You must grab your anklet very tight with both hands, he ordered. That will stop the poisonous juices from the venomous viper going up your leg and into your heart. The flesh lump eater grabbed his ankle with both hands. Now, close your eyes and grittle your teeth and look up to heaven and say your prayers while I is taking out the teeth of the venomous viper. The terrified flesh lump eater did exactly as he was told. The BFG signaled for some rope. He's being sneaky. A soldier rushed over to him. With both the flesh lump eater's hands gripping his ankles, it was a simple matter for the BFG to tie the ankles and the hands together with a tight knot. All right, and there's a picture of Sophie getting the brooch into the giant's ankle. I is pulling out the frightsome viper's teeth right now, the BFG said as he pulled the knot tight. Do it quickly, shouted the flesh lump eater, before I is poisoned to death. There he is, said the BFG, standing up. You can look now. When the flesh lump eater saw that he was trussed up like a turkey, he gave a yell so loud that the heavens trembled. He rolled and he wiggled. He fought and he figgled. He squirmed and he squiggled. But there was not a thing he could do. Well done, you, Sophie cried. Well done, you, said the BFG to Sophie, smiling down at the little girl. You is saving all of our lives. Will you please get that brooch back for me? Sophie asked. It belongs to the queen. The BFG pulled the beautiful brooch out of flesh lump eater's ankle. The flesh lump eater howled. The BFG wiped the pen and handed it back to Sophie. Curiously, not one of the other 8 snoring giants had woken up during this whole schmozzle. When you is only sleeping 1 or 2 hours a day, you is sleeping extra double deep, the BFG explained. The head of the army and the Air Force drove forward once again in their jeep. Her Majesty will be very pleased with me, the head of the army said. I shall probably get a medal. What's the next move? Now, you all is driving over to my cave to load up my bottles of dreams, the BFG said. Oh, we can't waste time with that rubbish, the army general said. It's the Queen's order, Sophie said. She was now back on the BFG's hand. So the 9 jeeps drove across to the BFG's cave, and the great dream loading operation began. There were 50,000 jars in all to be loaded up, more than 5,000 to each jeep, and it took over an hour to finish the job. While the soldiers were loading the dreams, the BFG and Sophie disappeared over the mountains on a mysterious errand. When they came back, the BFG had a sack the size of a small house slung over his shoulder. What's that you got in there? The head of the army demanded to know. Curiosity is killing the rat, the BFG said, and he turned away from the silly man. When he was sure that all of his precious dreams had been safely loaded on the jeep, the BFG said, Now we is driving back to the belly poppers and picking up those frightsome giants. There's a picture of the flesh lump eater howling as his leg hurts. The jeeps drove back to the helicopters. The 50,000 dreams were carried carefully, jar by jar, onto the helicopters. The soldiers climbed back on board, but the BFG and Sophie stayed on the ground. Then they all returned to where the 9 giants were lying. It was a fine sight to see them. These great air machines hovering over the trussed-up giants. It was an even finer sight to see the giants being woken up by the terrific thundering of the engines overhead. And the finest sight of all was to observe those 9 hideous brutes squirming and twisting about on the ground like a mass of mighty snakes as they tried to free themselves from their ropes and chains. "I is flush bungled," roared the flesh lump eater. "I is splits wiggled," yelled the child chewer. "I is swoggles walloped," bellowed the bone cruncher. "I is goose gruggled," howled the man hugger. "I is groans wiped," shouted the meat dripper. "I is flunk gungled," screamed the maid masher. "I is slop groggled," squawked the gizzard gulper. "I is crock squinkled," yowled the blood bottler. "I is bop mugglered," screeched the butcher boy. Those were some tough words, guys. All right, so there is a picture of the giants in the helicopters, or belly poppers, however you want to say it. The 9 giant carrying helicopters each chose a separate giant and hovered directly over him. Very strong steel howers with hooks on the end of them were lowered from the front and the rear of each helicopter. The BFG quickly secured the hooks to the giant's chains, one hook near the leg and the other near the arms. Then very slowly, the giants were winched up in the air, parallel with the ground. The giants roared and bellowed, but there was nothing they could do. The BFG, with Sophie once more resting comfortably in his ear, set off a gallop for England. The helicopters all banked around and followed after him. It was an amazing spectacle. Those 9 helicopters winging through the sky, each with a trussed-up 50-foot-long giant slung underneath it. The giants themselves must have found it an interesting experience. They never stopped bellowing, but their howls were drowned out by the noise of the engines. When it began to get dark, the helicopters switched on powerful searchlights and trained them on to the galloping giants so as to keep him in sight. They flew right through the night and arrived in England just as dawn was breaking. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We have 2 chapters left. I'm so excited. But we're going to stop there because we're at almost 18 minutes. So that's long enough for you guys. So I will finish BFG Friday. Okay, normally we don't have any assignments on Fridays, and you don't have to listen to this on Friday, but there's only 2 more chapters. It won't take very long, and I think you'll probably want to hear the ending. And yeah, Zoom tonight at 5:30. Bye, boys and girls.